Hi, Facebook friends. Helen Arcantu here, CEO of the YWCA of Northern New Jersey. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm so happy to be with you this evening. It is February, which means it's Black History Month. Black history is American history, so we celebrate it every day of the year. But it's wonderful that we have February to really honor Black excellence. And I can't think of a better way to do that without these three wonderful humans that I'm getting to spend this conversation with this evening. They are very, one, new to me, two, I've been carrying close to me for some time. And I know that it's going to be a wonderful conversation as we have when we share the mic now through YWTV with all of you out there in Facebook land. It's a wonderful opportunity that we have really embraced here at the YW to make sure we create space to really lift up Black women in our community and share their stories so that we can honor them. And so with that, so happy to have another installment today with my wonderful co-hosts. We have with us Ms. Rona Vega, who's here for be part of our Power Chat tonight. She is the founder and CEO of Parent Matters, and through her organization, she provides educational tools and resources to families and children from marginalized communities and works to empower them to succeed. We also have Ms. Shalisa McNeil Burgess, who is the founder and CEO of FREA LLC, and that's a company, as you all know, because we've had both of these wonderful women on, but a company that creates beautifully designed bracelets that decrease the intensity of hot flashes for women that are experiencing menopause. And let me just say, even if you're not experiencing menopause, it is a beautiful bracelet to have on your wrist. And so today, my wonderful co-host and I have the wonderful honor of being joined by Valerie Rainford, who is the CEO of Ellery Talent Strategies. Welcome, Valerie.
Thank you, Helen, Rona, and Shalisa. I'm happy to be with you.
Well, so tonight we're so happy you're here because we're going to be talking about the importance of companies advancing diverse talent to create transformational change within their organizations. And we are so grateful that we have you here. Want to tell our viewers a little bit more about you, that you founded the consulting firm Ellery Talent Strategies to advise C-suite executives on advancing diverse talent after driving historic diversity results at two iconic organizations on Wall Street. You are an international acclaimed author and a dynamic keynote speaker. And for our viewers to know that she also has shared her story and her struggle of her success in her memoir, Until the Brighter Tomorrow, One Woman's Courageous Climb from the Projects to the Podium. Her professional career started at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, where she spent 21 years building a reputation as a strong business leader with expertise in business change and transformation, rising to become the most senior Black woman and the first to achieve the level of senior vice president. She went on to spend 12 years at JP Morgan Chase, leading complex change programs and many stemming out of financial crisis, including related to the integration of Washington Mutual, the acquisition of Bear Stearns, and the mortgage crisis. Throughout her career, Valerie has supplemented her business leadership roles by serving as executive sponsors and advocates for diversity and inclusion initiatives. She is credited with launching the Fed's first employee resource group and hiring the organization's first chief diversity officer while running corporate real estate. She led a 30% increase in diversity hiring while she was running Chase Mortgage production quality operations. And at Ellery Talent Strategies, Valerie's able to bring the unique blend of her business strategy and metrics-driven focus on results to the business of diversity to impact diverse leaders across corporate America. Well, how wonderful is it that we are able to take all of these amazing talents that you have created through your career and now consult and help develop this for all types of businesses. We're so grateful that we have you out there, and even more grateful that you're here to share some of this.
Thank you.
evening.
I have to be reminded not to send the extra long bio in the future, though. That
Well, I mean,
We want the
Shalisa,
extra long.
yeah, I was just gonna say, Shalisa and Rona know I always encourage the extra long bio because you worked hard for all of that. You worked hard for all of that, and honestly, it really
Thank you.
helped. You know, there's so much inspiration in there for folks to, there's so much in there that, you never know what someone's going to grab onto when they hear it. So I say send the long bios always. As the ladies know, I'm big on that.
Now I know how you got it. You asked for it. So great.
Well, I just want to say something because I feel like every phenomenal Black woman that we have interviewed and shared the mic with here has said that. And it's almost like we don't want to share that long bio. It's hard for us to hear all the magnificent that we've done and all our Black girl magic. And it's so interesting that you said it, and it hit me today,
Yeah, I received that.
It has definitely been a theme that we've seen for sure.
All right, so thank you for reading the long bio. I am proud to have sent it to you.
Very good. So, well, look, let's jump into it because, part of, obviously I'm a CEO of an organization myself, of a mid-sized nonprofit organization. And, because of our mission and also because of our values as an organization, we really are very committed to creating spaces and opportunities for all women, but especially non-white women, to be able to really embrace their dreams, whether it's within our organization as part of our staff or within the women that we help try to cultivate and inspire through our programming. Yes. And developing entrepreneurs, developing job skills if they're working in a more formal work environment. I think it's important to start with because a lot of folks, and especially folks who look like me, may not understand that the systemic barriers that really still exist within our structures, our work structures, that really prevent women of color from rising within organizations. So can you start with kind of level setting that for us so that we all have an understanding that it exists and what the experience is?
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you. I'm pleased to be here. Thank you, Rona, for introducing me to this team. I like to say that where there are inequitable outcomes, there are inequitable policies and practices driving those.
Yep.
Okay. Like hands down, if you are looking at a result, so an organization has 10% women, an organization has 2% female entrepreneurs, there's no doubt in my mind that if you dig for the root cause, there's something inequitable in the practices employed by an organization that causes that outcome. And too often we look at the outcomes, but not the drivers or the inputs, right? And the reality is that systemic barriers are everywhere. Right? There are systemic barriers and then there are biased people. And when you put those two things together, that's what results in inequitable outcomes, right? And so there's systemic barriers along the entire business life cycle, whether it's for employees or it's for entrepreneurs, whether it's profit or nonprofit, whether it's in getting contracts as an entrepreneur or getting equitable pay as an employee. And it starts with recruiting to mobility and advancement. You can find inequity everywhere if you look for it. The committed leaders will try and solve for it, right? So when it comes to women inside business, as an example, attracting women is the first barrier, right? If you have an organization that is majority male, there are not enough women to drive a culture. One woman comes in, well, we'll come back and talk about oneness, right? Like I heard someone talk about oneness. Like oneness of anything is very difficult to navigate in organization. But when you think about attracting women, if there are not women there to serve as support and advocates and allies, like that's the first barrier. The good news is that organizations are increasingly more gender diverse, right? Organizations are setting goals of being 50% gender parity. But the challenge is in advancing and supporting women into executive leadership positions, right? The size of jobs we get, the types of jobs we get, how we are evaluated, right? The way strong ideas are received, right? And I fortunately or unfortunately, however you think about it, I have personal experience in all of those challenges, both as a woman and as a Black woman. And I'm pretty fortunate to have pushed through many of those difficulties and designed a business that I actually help others try to do the same, whether it's on the business side or the person side. But the barriers are real. We need
Yeah.
leaders that are willing to uncover where those difficulties are and support women and ethnic minorities in, navigating these organizations. And it's very, very difficult.
So can I ask a question? I know a lot of leaders, when they, if they are actually being proactive and trying to step in and address these issues, I often feel like, and through our YW, we do a lot of coaching through our Equity Institute. We work with other nonprofits or school districts, when these, when issues come up, but they're usually reactive, right? Something happens in the organization and then they reach out. It often feels like people are looking for like a checklist, like, let me do these 3 things, right? And then, I can move on, a situation handled. Can you speak a little bit about that? Because I do think that there that folks, especially who look like me, again, may not understand that's not going to cut it. That's not going to get to the root of the problem. And if anything, it's really going to create optic of, that you really don't understand. It's very obvious you don't understand the issue if that's how you're going at it.
So not only is it a checklist problem, but it's also a volume problem. So organizations will look at what the company right next to them is doing, look at what organizations say are best practices, but I've seen plenty of best practices that have not moved the needle, right? So the checklist problem is a real issue, but the volume problem, I think, is an even bigger issue. When I go into organizations, they're doing 100 different things, Helen. Like literally, I went into one organization and the project list around diversity had 65 things on it.
Wow.
64 of them were not making a difference. Right? So what I like to do is say to leaders, so first of all, do you know what problem you're solving for? The checklist takes someone else's list and says we're doing something. But a real commitment to diversity means you know what you're solving for and your strategy is focused on those things. And it's usually 4 to 5 foundational things that an organization will do and must do before they do the next 5 or 10 things. But trust me, it is never 65 things. It's never 40 things. And so what I like when I come upon a client that wants to engage with us, some of the very first things I ask is, so what's the mindset and culture of the organization? Where is DE&I? Where is the CEO of DE&I? Right? What kind of reviews have you done in the past? What does your reporting look like? And really, Helen, when they can't answer those questions, I know that's not a client that I want to work with. Right? Like, I'm not really interested in the checklist clients. I'm interested in the leaders who really want to make a difference in this space. And they understand that the business case for what they need to do is not on the checklist. It's in their people data. And if you're not looking at what the data says in its disaggregated way to understand where your unique challenges are, you're not solving for those. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. It totally makes sense.
Well, I didn't mean to depress y'all.
No,
it's not depressed at all. Not depressed at all.
We can't. The reality of it is, though, is we can't address it if we don't hear, the
That's
real
right.
truth about it. So
That's right.
I don't find it
That's right.
depressing, but I do find that, and I appreciate the clarity. So, and
Mhm,
for
mhm.
our viewers too, because everyone out there is connected to an organization, and every organization, is fraught with systemic racism. So it doesn't
Mhm.
matter if you're volunteering someplace or if you're the
Mhm.
CEO. There's
Mhm.
work to be done, so you should be listening and taking notes today.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and instead of
I think.
depressing, I think of the word disturbing. That it's
Mhm.
still a reality.
Mhm. By the way, like, let me also say there are individual barriers that we bring to the table too, right? I mean, women, ethnic minorities. You talk first. Let me talk about oneness, because I think oneness is really important, right? Like, some organizations will bring out that checklist. They'll hire the diverse person, the woman or the ethnic minority, and think they are suddenly diverse,
Mm,
right? Oneness is the hardest environment to work in,
the hardest.
right? And the easiest example that I use is the able versus differently abled or disabled person,
Mm.
right? That first person you bring in, that's different. That first one person you bring in, if the environment is not set up for their success, they're not going to be successful. Replace
Mhm.
that difference with any other difference. So that's a challenge. But then women in particular, I hate this term, but it's so widely used, I'll refer to it, the imposter syndrome, right?
Mhm.
Like, we often get into these situations or environments and we get in our own way. We don't ask for what we need or deserve. We acclimate to an environment that's not set up for our success. And we don't know how to leave a situation when it's not in our favor,
Time.
right? So those are,
You can say
they're
that again. That part.
well, that part is really
We
important,
don't
right?
know how to leave. I think you should expand on that a little bit and give women and anyone just the courage to, when they're not in a healthy workplace, how
Healthy
damaging that can be.
anything,
Yeah.
healthy anything, right? Like, you really can't succeed. Um, so I do this talent analytics work, and I also do executive coaching, right? Because I think it's the two parts of the puzzle, right? Like, you got to help organizations figure out where their gaps are, but you also have um, talent that are ready, but they're standing in their own way, right? And rarely is it about capability. Rarely is it about capability. And you have to have your life right in order for any one of the pieces to be right. So if you're holding on, if you're in places personally that's keeping your mind off of being most effective at work, neither of those things are going to be their best selves, right? And
Yeah.
oftentimes when we hold on to something on one end, we're holding on to something on the other end as well,
Mhm.
right? And I think we have to learn to step out of situations that don't serve us. And I can give you a specific example. It's old, but it's the one that I come to all the time, and that is, I was working. I've only worked in two organizations, so I'll say the first one. And I was doing incredibly well. Job was the same, and my boss changed, and all of a sudden, I was the worst person on the planet.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
And the language was that I wasn't capable of doing the job, and a new perspective was what elevated that. So I decided to test the theory because I had been successful. So, like, what changed other than my boss, right? So I literally said, okay, how am I going to see if this is me or the environment? And I started to give him the guy who worked for me. Like, everything that came out of my mouth, like, nothing made sense to my new boss.
Mhm.
So I started preparing the guy who worked for me with the same arguments, and the arguments went over well. The minute I figured out that that was more about the person and how
Mm.
they saw me and not my capabilities, less than 6 months later, I had a new job because I went searching for it. Right? So I think part of I like to say I've been in all of these situations where I've seen the barriers, whether they were someone else putting them on me or the organization. But I think I learned pretty early on in my career to not stay where I'm not welcome, to not stay in a situation that's not set up for my success. And if I didn't make it about the other individual, I made it's time for me to get the heck up out of here, right? And I think those decisions are sometimes hard for us to make. But I think we have to be smarter and strategic about how to make them.
Well, Valerie, can I jump in now? Because that really brought me back to an experience I had in my early corporate career, which is the reason why I decided 30 years ago that I'm not corporate. Like, I don't fit in that environment. And I had the exact same situation. At one point, my boss's boss, who was a senior VP, changed my review because she thought that my direct boss didn't give me a high enough score. And then my direct boss left. They gave me this guy who was known for being, for lack of a better word, a racist. And then all of a sudden, I was incompetent. I couldn't do the job. I'm like, I've been doing this job for 4 years. Every year, I've gotten nothing but high marks. Every year, I've gotten nothing but accolades. I had to work with the entire executive team, from the CEO, senior level, all of them. And every year, it was fine. And then this guy came, and all of a sudden I was incompetent. And he was sabotaging me. He wouldn't include me in meetings. He wouldn't include, like, even if I set up the meeting, he didn't think I should be there. He would have staff in meetings with the entire staff that reported to him, everybody but me. And his assistant would be like, Shalisa, I think you're supposed to be at this meeting. And I'm like, I never got an invite. And you're right. Just like that writing was on the wall for you, it was on the wall for me, but it was very difficult and painful. And I think that's part of the reason why we don't leave, because it's like, isn't someone going to advocate for me? Like, if I've been here for all this time and you all said I did great work, and then when my boss's boss changed so that I would get a higher raise, she changed my score to give me a higher raise. And now all of a sudden I am incompetent.
Shalisa, where did the boss's boss go in that example?
She didn't go anywhere. She was there.
She was still there?
Yeah, she was still there. And let it happen.
So I say to you, like, we have so often we go to work and our heads are down and we're delivering for everybody else and we're missing the sign. And I say you got to keep your ear to the ground and listen for the signs. And when stuff changes, listen, some people pick up a different strategy. Some people, they want to go complain about that that was just never my strategy. And I think it has a lot to do with how I grew up, by the way, which I know we will probably get to. Rona's not going to let me get off of this line without talking about, like, how that shaped me, right? But to me, it was, all right, like, we not having this, because I have bills to pay. And if I stay here too long, this thing is going to impact my ability to do that. So I'm just going to let you be right over here. And by the way, if y'all check out the stats on that individual, they have never had a successful Black woman ever work for them. But I ain't trying to be the one that changes that. I'm going to go over here and show y'all what I got. And I think too often, we're trying to fix the system. We're trying to fix the people. I'm in a position now where I can help people get the fix they need and the companies to get the fix they need. But when you're trying to come up in the place, I just didn't find that it was going to do me any good. Remember, we're talking 30 years in some cases, right? Today it's very different. But my strategy was like, nah, I need to keep it moving. And I'm not going to hang out with you if you're not going to have my best interest at heart. So literally, I used my network and I was in another assignment less than 6 months later. And by the way, was not going to let that individual, impact my compensation, my rating, or anything. Right?
But that
Like
takes a
that
lot
was,
of confidence and a lot of guts,
Yes.
and a lot of people don't have that
yeah,
same,
Yeah.
tenacity to be able to do that. And it is hurtful because, like Shalisa said, you're in a situation and I remember feeling like, on several occasions, like, is it me? Like, what am I doing wrong? And not that I'm trying, and then there is a part of me that was trying to fix the situation, because I'm like, well, I don't want anybody else to experience this. So I was kind of like, I just can't leave,
mhm.
So you're a little torn, and it's like you really can't fix a lot of these broken systems.
Well, for me, I don't think that it was confidence at first. It was
Mm.
fear.
Mm.
Yes. Fear.
For
Fear
me, it was
definitely takes over.
fear of failure, fear of not being able to take care of my responsibility. And again, I think my personal background sort of drove me to not leave myself in situations where I could possibly fail. And
Mm.
I think over time, with enough of that stuff and succeeding on the back end of it is where the confidence came from, right? But it wasn't. Listen, I have earned all the confidence that I show up with now. But I certainly didn't have it, you know, early the first half of my career. Now I have it, I got it pretty good now. But it took experiences and some failure and some avoiding failure, always with a goal of creating success. And I, I'm very, very blessed today to have had a whole bunch of different experiences that shape who I am.
I just want to make sure, I want to just shout something out for those that are watching, something to go back and just reinforce what you all just said, because, I very often hear from white women, I want to help, but I don't know how. We were just told how to help, and I want you to hope did you heard that when you see someone around you not being treated fairly, that you actually
Absolutely.
can stand up and say something and not just let it happen.
Hmm.
Shalisa said, I kept waiting for someone to jump in. These things don't happen without other people noticing them. So when you see something, say something. That is a really big way to help.
Well, you know what,
And
Helen? I think I have to just say that when you're in these corporate environments, there are cliques and there are levels of cliques.
Mm,
And if that person who is disparaging that one person, because I was the only one Black manager in my department, if there is a person who looks like the clique that starts disparaging that person, there isn't any benefit of the doubt for that one person, because they're like, well, you work with them daily. You must know we must have been wrong about this person, even though we've been working with them for 4 years or 5 years. So you don't have
Mm.
anybody who just stands up and goes, I don't know them in that way. That's not the
Right.
capacity through which I know them. You also notice that your peers and coworkers, well, who might have been your the equivalent of your work wife or your work husband,
mm,
all of a sudden be like, hey, there must be some validity to what this person is saying based on their level in the position or their level at that job. And
Right.
also the oneness of the majority being one culture and you being outside of that culture. So did I gain? I gained a lot. It was heartbreaking because I'm like, I've poured my blood, sweat, and tears into this. I have elevated this program that I'm managing. I'm managing it by myself. So all of that was like elevation of the program, and it was a global program. All of a
Mm.
sudden, it is not a less than program. It is still an elevated program, and it was still led by a woman of color. I really wish that we would have been able to get away from that. My competence has nothing to do with my color or my ethnicity or my culture. I just happen to be a Black woman doing this job because I'm qualified to do this job. And I shouldn't have to deal with these extra microaggressions that call my competency into question all of a sudden and not be supported. But that is the nature of people. And so my confidence took a whole leap and a bound, because after that, I'm like, there will never be a job that means more to me than life itself, the way I poured into this one that made it so easy for them to try to tear down my character. And like you, Valerie, I was like, I'm not staying here. I'm going to go find a job somewhere else. But it changed my entire mindset about work environments. I'm like, I am much better off being at the mercy of my own capacity. That way, if I fail, it's my fault. And if I win, it's my fault. But if somebody else has the power to make a determination about my qualifications all of a sudden, then I'm bound to fail. And that was something that I wasn't willing to do ever again.
I think the other thing that people, the non-Shalisas in that example, right, don't realize is it's circular, right? Like the minute it only takes one, to her point, right? And when you're the only one, it's even harder than what I'm about to say, right? But one person who has leadership authority and credibility to disparage the one individual, it takes on a life of its own that ultimately impacts your confidence and performance. So it's almost feeding into the narrative, right? Like just imagine what it's like to enter an organization, to be elevated to a position where it's just you. There's no sounding board. There's no role model. You're creating it from scratch. And someone who probably doesn't know you and doesn't have a relationship with you expresses an opinion. It might even be a little one, right? But that thing takes on a life of its own. And ultimately, when you wind up leaving, whenever that is, it almost looks as if what it was presented to be when it was never that in the first place, right? Like that's the challenge of oneness. So any organization that thinks that they are now magically diverse because they've got a woman or a Black woman or a Black man or whatever, like that is the hardest situation to put your people in. And by the way, it's also not inclusive, right? It's not diverse, it's not equitable, and it's not inclusive.
I think
and it's not a healthy environment either.
Right. But you know what they do in these environments? It's like they'll make diversity at a lower level position. So if I'm the only manager, they'll be like, but you have like 6 admin who are women of color. So we have diversity. Look, you're not the only one. But if you're the only one at your level and your peers don't have that same experience that you have, it does end up playing into you're because you are you, because you have the skin you have and the background you have and the hair texture you have that you change every week, all of those little things that become noticeable, that is what makes you less than. I remember going to work and people I worked with every day, we would have mass meetings of all of the people in the corporate communications, and they go, I don't think I've ever met you. Where do you work? I'm like, in the cube right across from you. Like, I was there. I've been there. I see you in the bathroom all the time, and I'm in the kitchen. Like, I saw you in the cafeteria yesterday. And they were like, oh my God, did you change your hair?
That's it all the time.
So can I just 2 thoughts I just wrote down that I want to share. And the first is still related to your last question, Shalisa. So I actually decided corporate wasn't for me too.
See?
About probably about 13 years ago. like it was almost like I was tired. And I knew, I mean, I left the Federal Reserve at 42 years old because I knew I was as senior as I was going to get, right? To sit there for another, 18, 20 years in the same spot was just not what I wanted to do, right? So I took a leap of faith and went somewhere else. And then I got into that environment and I still did very well. But again, all these things showed up and I navigated. I said I pushed through them because you can't jump over them. So you push through them, you navigate through them. But there was a point when I decided this is not what I want to do. I want to be my own boss. I knew I wasn't going to become a CEO inside of corporate America, and so I put a plan in place that would give me the flexibility to step out whenever I felt like it. And I literally had that plan together when I turned 50.
Wow.
I didn't know what I was gonna do, but I knew I need to be doing something outside of corporate. And I thought maybe it would just be the executive coaching piece. That's about the time I wrote my book, right? So I was trying to figure out like how I was gonna, create this third career for myself. And I was given the opportunity to lead that last job, advancing Black leaders. And I was like, well, wait, I didn't want to do this. But I like to say now, I think I did very well prior to that, but I did exceptionally well in that job in particular, because I knew I could walk out whenever I felt like it. I had set it up that I wanted to do something different. I didn't know what it was, but I had set stuff in motion, right? And so when I did that job, I had a level of freedom most people don't have,
Right.
right? Like I literally walked in every day with a level of freedom and an incredible boss who said, we have to do something about this problem. And everything I did, we made it up. It was groundbreaking. And there was a time when stuff started to get, I started to be reminded of how hard this work was with folk. And I was like, you know what? It's time to go exercise that dream. And now I know what it's going to be. It's going to be this historic work. It's almost as if, not to make your program religious or political, right? But it's almost as if God put me in a position to push through all I had been through, to get my situation such that I had maximum flexibility, to put me in a role that was destined for me with a level of freedom most people don't have. And so when I started my business, I was really, really clear. This is what I'm put on the planet to do. Right. And I think back to the point of we stay too long, right? We stay until we have nothing left to give and our confidence is shot. Like I was too afraid to be that person. So that's point number one. Sorry, it took a long time to get that out. So point number one. Point number two is I think that we have diversity, we have women, but you don't have any executive people, or you got one. It's the math game that's played in the diversity space.
Yep.
And the same is true for people of color. So organizations will say, they'll say they have women and yet they're in two functions. They're in support functions. They're at junior and mid-levels, few at the executive level. But for people of color, organizations will say, well, we've got people of color and it's increasing. But if you disaggregate the information by population, office, gender, level, whatever the disaggregation is, what I am finding in organizations is that, yes, they're growing people of color, but they are not growing Black and Latino people. In fact, in many organizations, the Black talent population suddenly started to grow in 21 and 22, and now it's on the decline again. So I think the math game of saying we're diverse, but yet not really having diversity or moving the needle is another significant problem. I'm fortunate to have some clients who are in this for the long haul, no matter what. And I consider that a blessing too.
Gotcha. Well, I'm going to go back to you talking about writing your book. You said you wrote it at 50?
I published it. So it was my 50th birthday present to myself. I literally published it on my 50th birthday and
wow.
Gave myself the biggest daggone birthday party you could think of and gave out hundreds. It never really occurred to me that I should sell this book, right? You sell a book, but my first instinct was to give as many away as I could. And so at the birthday party, there was this big table, and people could walk out with as many as they wanted. And here we are, 10 years later, and it's award winning. It's the summary is translated in Japanese. It's required reading in some New York City schools. I mean, it's been an amazing journey, but now it's time to write book two, I think.
But you wrote that book about a time in your life when you were like 19, 20 years old.
It started, yeah. Well, you've read it, right? So
I've read it.
Helen, we're about to give away the punchline. So I tried to pitch the idea for the book to some of the publishing houses and was told that the story was not believable. Two things I was told. The story was not believable, and it wasn't written in the way books are written, because I tell really the punchline in the first chapter. And then I take you back from that moment to describe the experiences that got me there, and then what I had to do in order to come out of it to great success. So it's a very quick read. It's only 152 pages, but it's my life story.
And everybody has a story to tell that is worth hearing. You're working in this whole DEI space, Valerie, though, and there's such a backlash going on right now. This post George Floyd, everybody wants to be warm and fuzzy, and now they don't. So with this backlash that's going on and so many DEI initiatives being rolled back, how are you combating that? You said you're fortunate to have your clients who are in it for the long haul, but I have to believe that even with those long haul clients, you have to have still come across that pushback now. That's like, well, maybe we don't need it. Maybe we have enough diversity. Maybe we can redefine diversity so that we're not limited to ethnicity, even though ethnicity is where diversity should be most felt, because that's where it's lacking. So what's been your experience on that so far?
Yeah, so I would, I'm writing down so I don't forget. Like, I think about it in 3 categories. And I'm not talking about the not committed, right? Like, let's talk about that group first. So the not committed people may have been committed a little bit post George Floyd, right? Because the community demanded the change, right? And first companies, like the first reaction we got post the killing of George Floyd right before our very eyes was, companies started responding with record donations or pledges. Some of those pledges are still not.
Pledges.
I was teaching a workshop last week, and I used the word donations, and this woman called me out. She said, they're pledges. So, okay, I correct myself. Many of them were pledges that never even resulted in donations, right?
Nope.
And many to nonprofits who were focused on equity and justice. And then you had, the community kept crying out for more, right? So then you had this unprecedented hiring of diversity leaders. You had what I call the bold push toward Black, like companies, not just companies, but the world used to talk about Black people. We used to talk about people of color, and now it was okay to talk about Black. We used to talk about Black and Indigenous people of color, BIPOC. I hate the acronyms, by the way. And now it was Black and Latino. We had a whole debate about Latino versus Latinx, but it was a conversation that needed to be had, right? And then companies started making these public commitments to increase diverse representation. We started, seeing goals and targets showing up in board reports and ESG reports and shareholders reports. And then you saw increases of Blacks on boards and in leadership positions. You saw entrepreneur programs and the HBCU program. And then came the SCOTUS ruling, right? And $351 billion pledged in a 2-year period of time. And then you had the SCOTUS ruling, right? And you start to see these small lawsuits crop up. And the landscape shifted almost as quickly in 2022 as it did in 2020, where corporate commitment is waning. And now we're going back to people of color, inclusion and belonging, less conversation about equity, diverse leaders are under fire, so I think we're starting to see gains starting to be erased, right? But that's the non-committed community. Like that community responded to the pressure. There was probably never commitment in the first place. I'm fortunate that those people don't come to me, right? Like those are the checklist people, Helen, right?
Yeah.
Those are the volume people. I tend to get the people who are like, wait, so how did you figure that out over there? And how do we do it over here? And I put those people today in 3 categories. There's some that are like, wait, should we be waiting? Should we be, by the way, the sentence is usually like, let's just wait until after the next election is over. Right? And I'm like, okay, so what exactly changes inside your company after the election? So that will be how I take that conversation, right? Like if these are the areas where you have a challenge, you might actually have more of those in another year or two. So stay committed to what you were trying to do. There's some who like they want to continue, but they're unsure about how. So I put these big goals out there so that there's some coaching and consulting to do for organizations who want to stay committed, but they also, and they will stay committed, but how do they change up how they present themselves after being so public post 2020? And then there are, my favorites who they're not changing anything and they're willing to stand up for what they know to be embedded issues that need addressing, and they know that they're in positions of authority to do that. And some are very outspoken with how they do it, and some are not. I just want the ones that are brave enough to keep going to do so, and I will be there coaching them and consulting along the way, right? And I think the ones that aren't committed, everybody knows who those are.
Right.
Just look at the headlines of who's backing away and who's changing the title of what they're doing and who's eliminating programs. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to work for those organizations.
Well, and I also
Right.
want to call out too, I mean, you're talking about corporate environments, those of us who work in the nonprofit sector, for any of you who are listening, we as a sector and have really created a culture that reinforces inequity ourselves. We do not pay our staff well. We encourage folks to, work for the mission, despite what that means for your health, the hours you put in. And, we say it's because of funding, which is true because our funding is different and limited. But, we really should be calling out to our funders to do different because we're really reinforcing something that we say that we stand against if we don't really try to create a backlash to really the culture that we've created in the nonprofit sector. So, for-profit sector, nonprofit sector, folks, wherever you're connected, this is an issue that you really have to be taking note of because we really have the power to make change, but everyone really needs to be, actively engaged at every level to be doing it.
And Helen, I think that like the one point that I want to reiterate, double click on, triple click on is like we have to be leaders who are courageous enough to operate with facts, right? Most of these situations that are cropping up are not dealing in fact. No population of people should be put at a premium versus another, right? That I'm not at all advocating for that. Organizations need to be able to take care of all of their people,
Right.
regardless of background, religion, ethnicity, gender, ability, equally, equitably, even more so, right? And the only way you know where the gaps are for your people is to look inside your people data to understand those and to solve for them. You're not solving your organization's problem by following the company next to you and what they think are best practices.
Mhm.
And when leaders are courageous enough to start there, that's how you move the needle. That's how you get your funding or your investment, whatever it is. And it's not just the outputs, how many you have, but what's the inputs? How many are falling through the recruiting process? How many are, we just did an analysis for a company this week where, here's your top talent of all populations, Mr. CEO. And if we look at the data for one cohort versus another, let me say it more directly. If you look at the top talent data in your organization and the salaries and bonuses of the white people at the same level are greater than those of the Black people or the Latino people or the women, that is an inequitable outcome. So I'll end where I started, right?
Right.
Like where there is an inequitable outcome, there is an inequitable practices driving it.
Mhm.
And if you are seeing that you have E-rated employees, but their bonuses and their compensation differ by group they're in, that is an inequitable practice. You don't
Wow.
know it if you don't do that level of analysis in the organization and identify what you need to be solving for, not what your competitors should be solving for.
I'm
Well,
glad you
Anyway,
said
that's a
that.
lot.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot, but I'm glad you ended and started in the same place because you really brought us full circle. And Rona, did you have any closing comments? I know you were
Yeah.
starting there.
No, thank you. I just wanted to say that what you were saying is so on point and how important it is. And I wanted to ask actually really quickly for you to just explain to the audience that are looking, what type of companies generally know that they need your services? And how do they know to reach out to you? How do they know when they need this
Well, I'm pretty fortunate.
work that you do?
I gotta work on this a little bit, but I'm pretty fortunate that most of my business is referral.
Okay.
So when I have done work inside of an organization, I'm generally working with the executive leadership team. If I get the call from the chief diversity officer, that's the start of the conversation. Like you can't do the kind of work that I do if you don't have a CEO on board. So when we've
Right.
done the work, we open the eyes of the executive team. I can't tell you how many times I've sat in a meeting and they're like, damn, we didn't know that was happening. Your people didn't know what to look for. We know what to look for. And so when that level of eye opening has happened at the executive leadership team in one organization, that tends to follow to whoever their friends are. And so we've been fortunate to have a referral business from some of the top leaders inside of organizations. And, that's a blessing too.
Wow, I love it. Well, I want to close with one thing before my last
Yes,
words.
ma'am.
I just want to share how impactful this book was. I'm so grateful to my neighbor who actually worked for you. And we started a women's group, and your book encouraged me so much to start this support group for women. And it's actually a group for women, mostly of color, but all women. And just to go back and dig up their sexual dreams and to encourage each other, because we're dealing with so much as women in the workplace, at home, in our families, raising kids, and everything that falls apart is always our fault. So we always have to look like we have it all together, even when we don't. And so the support groups that you started for women in these organizations was so important. And then just honestly, the work that I do now is literally standing on the shoulders of you, because you opened up so many doors for kids, for youth of color and executives of color, even for my sons to be in the kind of jobs that they are, my daughters, and unfortunately to still be in a situation. I mean, it was beautiful to be here with my son and help him move in and all good today, but for him to look at me and say, so mom, guess what? It's only 2 other people that look like me. And so that's still and he's gotten used to it over time and internships and stuff like that, but it's still not comfortable. And we all still need that. So thank you for all the work that you've done over the years. I want to give a shout out to your book, but I also have been talking within our groups about the Black tax, right? And everything that we've dealt with and all the things that we suppress and try to hold on and cope and look like we're not going through. And another book was brought to my attention, and I know there may be some men and some Black women listening. It's called The Invisible Ache, Courtney B. Vance. And I'm in chapter 8. And it reminded me of your book, because of some of the same tragedies that he experienced, unfortunately. And it just goes back to the same. It really goes back to the same, and why you put your head down and did the work you did. And so you could be in a different level and position and hope those same tragedies didn't happen again. And so we have so much work to do, and it's tough. It's tough. That's all I got to say.
It starts with sharing our stories, though, right? Like sharing our stories so others can heal and learn. Like even Shalisa's sharing hers today. I think it's important for us to realize that most people think that they're in it by themselves and they're the first person to go through it. And that's not the case in most instances, right? So we have to help each other, and groups to support and share and learn is part of the solution, I think.
Well, thank you for sharing your story.
Yes, thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me, ladies. I really appreciate it.
Oh, we're so grateful that you could come spend some time with us. Like you shared so much information and really left a lot for us to sit with, simmer, as I say, and more conversations to come. Shalisa, do you have any last words before we close out?
I just want to say thank you so much, Valerie, for bringing the platform to bear so that this was a place to share this story. I don't think I've had a conversation about that experience in 30 years, because that's how long ago it was. But it was a really significant pivot in my mindset around work environments and how you value yourself, because it is meant to be diminishing. And I think that that's what's taken a toll while we're seeing suicides and heart attacks. And I don't understand why there's not humanity in there. It doesn't matter if there's somebody working there. It doesn't have anything to do with a quota or anything. They had to fight hard for these positions, especially when you get to positions of significance in management or leadership. And to constantly be in a state of, I proved myself today, I proved myself again tomorrow, I'll have to prove myself again next week. And it's such a delicate balance or dance that one person can come in the door and all of a sudden I'm back at the bottom. And no one understands what feels like until you're in that position. And so I wanted to thank you for that, for just bringing this conversation out, because whoever's listening, they might be going through it, and you could just understand you are the only one who can value you more than anything. And if that job's hire you, somebody else is going to hire you, or you can learn to hire yourself and then change the trajectory completely and totally. And it won't be any harder than the hustle you had to do, proving yourself every day to people who are never going to value you in the first place. So thank you.
Amen, girl.
So Amen. You sound like you're in the pulpit, girl. I hear you. Yes, you got to value yourself and get out while you can.
Yep. Yeah, there were so many nuggets in here. I hope everyone was taking notes. I was taking some I was typing some as we were talking myself. And like I said, there's definitely more to come. For our viewers, you can connect with Valerie, learn more about her work. We have the link here for her company, Ellery Talent Strategies, and you can click to learn it. Also, I encourage you, we have the links here so you can learn more about myfria.com, and also Exposures and Opportunities, where you can learn more about all the great work that Rona's connected to. We encourage you to check it all out. We also encourage you to stay connected to the YW. Mark your calendars. March 20th at Loopwell is our annual Women's Leadership Conference. That is a place that we just encourage you to come and be poured into for the day, so that you can be inspired and really go wherever it takes you to where you really need to grow to. That's what that day is really all about. So we hope you join us on April 30th. We have our Racial Justice Awards. And Rona is a recipient of one of our Racial Justice Awards, actually. That will be at the, yes, for a few years ago, but yes. So this year, join us on April 30th at the Montclair Art
I think
Museum.
I'm in New York that day.
Okay.
Yes. Oh, we would love to have you come. We'd love to have you there too. And, stay tuned to our social media, connect to all of them on social media as well, so you can follow the great work that they're doing. And we look forward to seeing you the next time we Power Chat. Take care, everyone.
Guys,
Be well.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.